are really loud. Okay, so we are continuing on creationism. We've kind of looked at really there's two theories. Either we were created by an intelligent being, God, and we're designed, we're on purpose, or time came from nowhere and matter just created itself somehow and exploded and created the earth, and humans came from, evolved all by accident, all by chance. And we're looking at the evidence. What evidence? I want to say evolution is not science, okay? Science is observable, repeatable, okay? When it comes to the Big Bang, they don't know how it happened, okay? They're just guessing. They're on their 200th theory, okay? Nobody was there. They can say, you weren't there when God created the earth, and it's just faith. Well, they weren't there either when the world came into existence. They're just making up stuff, and we're looking at the evidence which best fits the theory of evolution or creationism. We looked at the fossil record. If we've been evolving for billions of years and this half-formed species all the time, we should find what? Fossils, lots of fossils, okay? Because things are constantly changing, constantly evolving, and we don't find that. And even the evolutionists admit there's no intermediate fossils, okay? And they go crazy when they think they've found one, and we're going to look at some of those later, but I think one of them, I can't remember which man, Piltdown man, they had a pig's tooth, it turned out. This is science. We're going to get a tooth, and, we found the missing link from a tooth, and then we found out later it's a pig's tooth, but we'll get into that. But that's how desperate they are for intermediate fossils. They don't exist. We looked at natural selection, and really natural selection goes against evolution, okay? It really does, because it doesn't give new information. They say new information comes from mutations, but mutations do not create new information, okay? They scramble the information that's there. Nobody is looking to get radiated, okay? When you go to Roswell and you're getting cancer treatments, the doctors all have lead suits and lead things, and they hide. They do not want radiation, okay? They're not looking, well, maybe I could get mutated, and this would be great, okay? We know that mutations are bad. They're rare, they're bad, they don't create any new information, okay? We know that if organs or parts are evolving, okay, it's going to take thousands of years, right? So really, natural selection would weed out those things, half-formed organs, any half-formed arm that's not an arm or a wing. So really, natural selection works against mutations and really works against their view of evolution. There is a limit to genetics, okay? That was something Darwin didn't realize. You can't just keep putting tall people together and just keep going higher and higher and have a 12-foot person, okay? There's a limit that limits information, okay? We know dogs, there's varieties in species, right? Okay, anybody who's got dogs, there's variety, and you can breed variety, okay, but that means there's less and less, what? Information, okay? As you breed it to an extreme, there's less and less information, okay? And you can't go on forever with genetics. There's a natural limit that they found, and the one guy was breeding flies, and he for 30 years, and he still ended up with what? Flies. Millions of generations of these flies, okay? And even intelligently, intelligent person controlling it could not breed a new species. So they want to tell you, well, just by chance it happened. We can't do it on purpose. We don't see evolution happening. They can't name one species that changed from one species to another. They say, well, it happened millions of years. That's why we don't see it. So they're basing it all on conjecture, okay, what they think. There's no proof, no evidence. That's not science, okay? That's not science. It's not science versus faith. It's faith versus faith. And it takes me way more faith to believe that we are accidents, okay? I mentioned the walking along argument, okay? You see an arrowhead, you'd say what? Some intelligence created that. Imagine if you saw a watch, okay? Imagine if you saw a cell phone. You would say, you've never seen a cell phone before in your life. you'd say, wow, that was created. That's not an accident. That has intelligent designers, engineers. And we look at the human body, and it is highly engineered, something we can barely understand. We don't understand everything about the human body. And, what we do understand, it's just amazing, the complexity that we can't even imitate with all our wisdom and knowledge. So we're looking at Vegas odds on life. The time The Origin of the Species was published, about half of all surgical patients typically died from infection. Can you imagine that? You got a surgery tomorrow, you got a 50% chance of living. That's not very good. It was the work of Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister that proved infections are always spread, leading to the modern concept of sterile techniques. And where did, I think it was Lister, where did he get that from? The Bible, okay? The Bible's not a scientific textbook, but it's got science in there. Read those chapters. I know they're boring, but when there's a spot and there's this, what are they supposed to do? Stay outside the camp, okay? What's that called? Quarantine, okay? What were they supposed to do if it was spreading? They were supposed to burn it, okay? That sterilizes things. That stops disease. And he read the Bible, and he knew that. He said, they weren't even washing their hands. They're going from dead patients to living. They're disease. They're spreading. They're really spreading disease. And then they started washing their hands with still water. But what does the Bible say? Running water, okay? Running water. This was written, thousands and thousands of years ago in the Old Testament, and we didn't realize it a couple hundred years ago. And it's just amazing that the Bible knew, you can clearly see that. When you read those chapters, I know it's boring reading, but think about that. In the Civil War, they didn't even really understand disease, and they had dead animals, and they were dying from disease. They didn't even understand having the bathrooms outside the camp. God had that all written down and told them where to go, and we didn't even realize that during the Civil War. And somebody came in, Von Baron Steuben said, hey, you've got to change the way you're dying from disease. You've got to put the bathrooms out there. You've got to keep dead people, dead animals. You've got to keep them outside. They didn't even understand that during that war. So Darwinists were slow to accept this discovery. However, because evolution, ruling out creation by God, requires that life can arise by itself, Germany's Ernest Haeckel, one of the great 19th century popularizers of Darwinism, continue to push the old concept of spontaneous generation. He predicted that spontaneously generated bacteria would be discovered. In 1868, he even published speculative drawings of such. You don't need evidence, you don't need proof. I know this is going to happen. I'm going to draw diagrams of that. Can you imagine a murder happening and we're trying to find out who did it? And I think this person did it. I'm going to draw diagrams, pictures of what I think the suspect looks like. I know it must be him. No way is that science. No way would that make it on CSI, okay? That's ridiculous. But they're making pictures of something they have no proof of and no evidence of. Within a year, British zoologist Thomas Huxley, known as Darwin's bulldog, claimed to have discovered Haeckel's bacteria in mud samples taken from the ocean's depth. Huxley dubbed the find Bathybius haeckeli in Haeckel's honor. It was widely reported that spontaneous generation had just been proven. Okay? And this is what they're going to do. They're going to say, it's proven science. We got it. We figured it out. Microscopic examination by a chemist, however, ascertained that Huxley's bacteria were just chemical precipitate. All of the efforts to generate spontaneous generation of life have failed. So Darwin never addressed where did things come from. Okay, where did life originate? Okay, try to generate life. Okay, I was talking with somebody about evolution, and they were saying, well, we're living. I go, that's harder to create something living. Okay. I can make a rose out of metal, clay. I can make a rose out of all these things, but try to make a living rose out of nothing, okay? Try to make something living out of something dead. That's impossible. Natural selection attempts to explain how living things change, but it doesn't explain how they began, a gaping hole in evolutionary theory. Today is commonly taught that life arose from non-living materials in a primordial soup. Okay, you hear these things at the beginning of these shows, and they got the deep voice, and they sound English, and they sound authoritative, and they must know what they're talking about, and they don't. Charles Darwin mused, "It is often said that all the conditions for the first production of living organisms are now present which could ever have been present. But if, and oh what a big if, we could conceive in some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts, light, heat, electricity, etc., present, that a protein compound was chemically formed, ready to undergo still more complex changes at the present day, such matter would be instantly devoured or absorbed, which would not have been the case before living creatures were formed." And I just want to say this, I'm getting this from the book Tornado in a Junkyard, okay? And I've read a lot of creation evolution books, and some are so simple, they're more for children, they're not scientific, and some are so scientific. I've read them and I'm like, I don't understand a word of what they say. It's just advanced. It's for scientists refuting other scientists, and I've really found that he has a great balance here. He gets deep, but not too deep where you just get lost. We're going to get into some science things here, so bear with me, but some deeper things, but we'll keep going here. In Darwin's day, cellular complexity was unappreciated. Haeckel called the cell a simple lump of albuminous combination of carbon. So we're talking, Darwin wrote all this stuff. He had no idea how complex things are. We're finding the more we find out, the more complex we realize things are. It was assumed that chemicals could combine to form one with relative ease. However, as scientific advances showed cells were anything but simple, the odds against their chance formation increased. Even more deadly to the theory, oxygen, present everywhere, would destroy amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, which are the main components of cells. So a little science lesson here. I'm sure we have a couple nurses know all about this, know more than I do. But the amino acids make up proteins, which make up cells. In the 20th century, a Soviet biochemist, A.I. Oparin, further developed the evolutionary theory of origins. He proposed that there was no free oxygen in the ancient Earth's atmosphere. Okay, now what does he base that on? Nothing, okay, you don't need proof for this. Oparin's theory was validated by the famous experiment of Stanley Miller in 1953. Miller created an apparatus in which he combined water with hydrogen, methane, and ammonia, and subjected the mixture to electric sparks. So they're going to tell you, well, we created life in a test tube, it must be possible, and that's what they're teaching people. After a week, he discovered that some amino acids had formed in a trap in the system. It was believed that in the primitive Earth, lightning could have struck a similar array of chemicals and produced amino acids. So they've been able to produce amino acids. Is that life? No. Experiments such as Miller's have created headlines proclaiming that life has been created. Okay, do you get that? We create the lowest little block of a part of a cell, and we've created life. We've figured it out. To be clear, though, although scientists have synthesized some organic chemical, no one has ever synthesized life. Okay, they want to tell you that it's settled. We've created life in a test tube. No, they haven't. The Oparin-Miller model is probably evolution's most widely accepted theory of origins, but it faces a number of problems. And I'm going to get a little deep here, so if you can bear with me. Number one, it's doubtful that the young Earth was oxygen-free. Okay, so they're basing it on this presumption that there was no oxygen, and that's how the atmosphere was, and somehow it magically changed. But the Bulletin of American Meteorological Society noted, recent photochemical calculations by atmospheric researchers at Langley Research Center were presented at an international scientific conference last fall. They state that, at the time, complex organic molecules, which are the precursors of living systems, were first formed from atmospheric gases. The Earth's atmosphere was not composed primarily of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, as was previously supposed. Oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere may have been up to 1 million times greater than anyone ever thought. So they did this experiment with these gases, assuming, well, this is what the atmosphere must have had to have been made of, but they found it wasn't. The same year, Clemmy and Badham confirmed in geology. They said recent biological and interplanetary studies seem to favor an early oxidized atmosphere rich in CO2 and possibly containing free molecular oxygen. The existence of early red beds, their sand deposits stained with rusty color of oxidized iron, sea and groundwater, sulfate, oxidized terrestrial and seafloor weathering crusts, and the distribution of ferric iron in sedimentary rocks are geological observations and inferences compatible with the biological and planetary predictions. It is suggested that from the time of the earliest dated rocks at 3.7 billion years ago, Earth had an oxygenic atmosphere. Okay, so they did this experiment. They're saying it's they must have really smelled of methane and ammonia were in the oxygen. You know they're very harmful. They're not good for you. Okay, you can't live on those things. But that's what they're saying. Where this presupposition, they found there's other sources I skipped. They're saying the Earth had oxygen like it does now. So number two, let's assume O'Parent and Miller were right and the early atmosphere had no oxygen. Without oxygen, no ozone layer, okay, would exist to protect us from the sun's cosmic rays. What's the big fear? I remember when I was a kid, what was the big fear? The hole in the ozone layer, okay. I remember not being able to go to sleep because I was just told every day there's a hole in the ozone layer, and I was worried about that. That was the big thing. It wasn't global warming or global cooling. It was the hole in the ozone layer caused by my sister's hairspray. But they just seemed to go away, and I read up on it, and then they say, well, we made this protocol banning hairspray, this CFCs and hairspray, and that's what saved the world. That it's all fixed. And then they found out later that it opens and closes on its own, and they didn't really understand it, but somehow that was going to kill us all, and just disappeared. Then we had global cooling. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Global cooling is going to kill us. The ice age is coming, and then global warming. Now, it's not really warming like they say, so what's the new catchphrase? Climate change. Yes, the climate changes anyway, but I'm getting off track here. But, see how science trusts us, don't doubt the science, but when we go from global cooling to global warming to something in between, it can be whatever it is, cooling or warming, we're all going to die. It's tough to believe that. And trust them to trust us this time, we know. Carl Sagan pointed out, so if it was that atmosphere that they believed that they were able to do in their experiments, there'd be no ozone layer. Carl Sagan pointed out that subject to that much ultraviolet light, today's organisms would receive a lethal dose of radiation in just 0.3 seconds. How could the fragile beginnings of life have survived in such an environment? Carl Sagan is an evolutionist, I'm pretty sure, but he's saying if you don't have oxygen, you don't have an ozone, things are going to just get fried, and life couldn't survive without the ozone. Number three, if a vast primordial soup existed, geology should corroborate it. As Michael Denton notes, if the traditional story is true, therefore, there must have existed for many millions of years such a rich mixture of organic compounds in the ancient oceans, and some of this material would likely have been trapped in sedimentary rocks, laying down in the seas of those remote times. Yet rocks of great antiquity have been examined over the past 2 decades, and in none of them has any trace of abiotically produced organic compounds been found. So if this primordial soup existed, we should find evidence of it, and we don't. Philip A. Abelson of the Carnegie Institution's Geophysical Laboratory said, if this methane ammonia hypothesis were correct, there should be great chemical evidence supporting it. What is the evidence for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere on Earth? The answer is that there is no evidence for it, but much against it. Okay, so this one theory about possibly how these could have been formed really doesn't hold up. Number 4 is lightning, which is considered stronger than Miller's electric sparks, often destroys what it contacts. Lightning, of course, occurs all the time today, produces nothing like the elements of life, okay? Nobody's asking to get struck by lightning, hoping that's going to be good. Okay, it's very, very powerful, very dangerous. So he's able to give these little sparks, and then he's going to say, well, lightning struck, and, that's how it happened. Okay? Miller wrote that because organic compounds are unstable, such could possibly not have originated life unless the oceans were quite cool. A temperature of 0 degrees Celsius would have helped greatly, they said. But how could the young Earth, which was supposedly graduating from a hot molten state, have been that cold? You see how their own theories don't mesh with each other. They're saying the Earth had to be hot because it's cooling down, but it needed to be cold in order to form this. So their own theories don't match. Miller performed this experiment under precise conditions, using a flask as a trap. Ancient oceans have no controlled environment or flask. So in the perfect conditions, he's able to create this and trap it, but that's not how the real world works. Evolution denies that life had a designer, but even if scientists did manufacture life in the lab, wouldn't that only show that it's an intelligent process? Okay, so they need these intelligent scientists getting just the right chemicals and setting things up just the right way and doing all this and experimenting, to get this thing. Shows what? Design, okay? Intelligence is what it took, okay? So it really goes against their theory that it's accidental, no intelligence, all by itself. Number 7, perhaps most importantly, the amino acids Miller produced, as we shall see, are a trivial fraction of what life requires. Okay, so that's amino acids. Creating amino acids in a test tube is not life. It is a small fraction. You're going to get a little science lesson today. So amino acids to proteins. Our bodies are made up of cells. Cells consist of many proteins. Proteins are chains of amino acids. So before we got a cell, Miller's amino acids would first have to form proteins. Okay, so in order to get just a cell, we need amino acids, and then they need to form proteins. A protein must be magnified 1,000,000 times to become visible to the eye. Think about that. That's why they had no idea how complex it is, 1,000,000 times just to be able to see it. Human cells use about 200,000 different proteins. Most proteins have hundreds of amino acids. Okay, so they're able to create one amino acid. A protein has hundreds of amino acids in a chain to form one protein. Every amino acid has at least one activating enzyme. Protein formation requires that amino acids be activated by their enzymes and collected by a substance called transfer RNA. Okay, so we're getting complex here. Ribonucleic acid, like DNA. But did Miller's lightning strike the primordial soup also produce enzymes and transfer RNAs? Okay, so it's more than just amino acid. It's these other things that are required to make it work. Another difficulty for the Opare and Millen model, when an amino acid joins a chain, a water molecule is released. Therefore, if water is present, a water molecule will normally be given back and the chemical process reversed. How then could proteins have formed in ancient oceans? As A.E. Wilder Smith noted, the ocean is thus practically the last place on this or any other planet where the proteins of life could be formed spontaneously from amino acids. Aware of this problem, evolutionists have invented different scenarios, such as that the amino acids washed up on a volcano's rim where heat evaporated the water. Okay, do you see how you're just making up stuff? That didn't work. We're going to make up another theory. It doesn't matter how far-fetched, because anything can happen over billions of years. Given enough time, do we have any proof? No, we just could have possibly happened, but that's what they're coming up with. But this goes against the Miller-Orgel thesis of a cool environment. Such fanciful hypotheses have not enjoyed wide acceptance. So they really... Could you shut those doors, Brother Nicotera? Oh, wicked people skipping out of Sunday school. So their theories just really go against each other. They wouldn't have worked. I'm sorry, our atmosphere was not made of methane and ammonia. Okay, so it doesn't work. So what are the chances of this happening, of life occurring? I don't play poker. I don't know if anybody here plays poker or knows. I'm glad I didn't learn how to play. But the rarest hand is anybody know what the rarest hand is? It's a straight flush. Okay, who said that? Yeah, I know. Who answered that? I did hear it answered. Okay, straight flush. Okay, so the 5 numerically consecutive cards, all the same suit. Okay, that's what it takes. All right, play the game tonight. You're probably not going to, I'm not encouraging you to play it tonight, but you're probably not going to get a straight flush. But when you played for months on end, sooner or later you'll probably land one eventually. You play long enough, you play often enough, you'll get it. Suppose I'm batting. I'm not much of a baseball person. I grew up and we played cricket, but suppose I'm going against Nolan Ryan, okay, and he's pitching as a Hall of Fame pitcher, and I'm probably not going to hit much, right? Okay, but if I do it enough, often enough, I keep doing it, I may get a hit and may go into the outfield just by sheer luck, sheer chance, okay, me swinging at it enough times, okay, it can happen. I'm not going to get a home run or anything, but just chance, that can happen. Eventually I'll get a hit, okay? If I swung hundreds or thousands of times, I'm going to get it. So evolution uses this type of argument, asserting that given enough time, the right amino acids could have assembled by chance and formed a protein. So that's their thing. Well, it's very unlikely, but if millions and billions of years, it could have happened. Okay, there's a chance. Is it true? Okay, is this possible? If you had a deck of cards numbered 1 to 10, shuffled them, what's the odds that they come out in the precise order 1 through 10? The chances are 1 in 3,628,800 that just 10 cards in a row. Can you imagine doing that for 3 million times just to get, 1 through 10? Okay. Now suppose you had a deck or a system of components had 100 components. Okay, so you had 100 cards. What's the chance of you laying them out, getting 1 through 100 in a row? Okay. The chance of appearing in precise order would be 10 to the power of 158. Okay, you put 158 zeros, one with 158 zeros, okay? 3 is 1,000, 6 is 1,000,000, 9 is 1,000,000,000. I mean, it just gets into numbers we just can't fathom. 158 zeros. That is a chance of just 100 things happening in a row. Remember that the odds greater than 1 to 10 to the power of 50 are considered impossible. So the power of 50 is impossible. The power of 158 is really impossible. Okay, so our analogy is imperfect since the body uses 20 different amino acids, but the average protein chain consists of well over 100 of these. So a protein has to have 100 amino acids all lined up in the correct order in order to form one protein. Okay, it must be exact order. So we start to sense the magnitude of the problem. For more precise analysis, Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick, okay, anybody know what he discovered? I learned this in high school. DNA. Okay, Crick, James Watson, they got a Nobel Prize for discovering DNA. So this guy, Nobel Prize in science, that's pretty hard to get. If it's a Nobel Peace Prize, well, Obama can get that for doing nothing. But this is a science one. This is a little harder to get. You actually have to do something, okay, not just get elected and, what they think you're going to do. Anyway, so he said this: if a particular amino acid sequence was selected by chance, how rare would this be? Suppose the chain is about 200 amino acids long. This, if anything, rather less than the average length of proteins. So 200, he says, less than the average. Since we have just 20 possibilities at each place, the number of possibilities is 20 multiplied by itself some 200 times. This is written as 20 to the power of 200. It's approximately equal to 10 to the power of 260 zeros. Okay, it just becomes 0, 0. But think of that. It's just unbelievable. That is 1 followed by 260 zeros. This number is quite beyond our everyday comprehension. The great majority of sequences can never have been synthesized at all at any time. So just one little protein to form life, the chances are impossible, okay? It's just unfathomable. Hemoglobin, the blood's oxygen-carrying protein, has 2 chains, alpha and beta, and containing a total of 287 amino acids. Some individuals inherit a gene which causes the amino acid valine to substitute for the amino acid glutamic acid at position 6 of the beta chain. Okay, we're getting complex here. This results in sickle cell anemia. Even though the other 286 amino acids are assembled perfectly, this shows how flawless a protein structure must be. Okay, 286 must be perfect. Okay, they must be all lined up perfectly. If one is out of order and one is switched, we get sickle cell anemia, okay, and nobody wants that. So just think of how perfect everything is. And we were doing those numbers with 200 amino acids. This is 286, must be in a perfect line, okay, must be all perfect, and the chance is just impossible. Sir Fred Hoyle, the eminent British astronomer, said, "At all events, anyone with even a nodding acquaintance with the Rubik's Cube will concede the near impossibility of a solution being obtained by a blind person moving the cube at random." Now imagine 10 to the 50 blind persons, each with a scrambled Rubik's Cube, and try to conceive of the chance of them all simultaneously arriving at the solved form. You then have the chance of arriving by random shuffling of just one, the many proteins on which life depends. The notion that not only the proteins but the operating program of a living cell could be arrived at by chance in a primordial organic soup here on Earth is evidently nonsense of a high order. Okay, they're not going to tell you this. They're going to say, we created life in a test tube and it's proven it can be done. Okay, they're kind of missing a few things out. Everybody agrees, all scientists think this. No, he said it's nonsense of the highest order. Sir Bernard Lovell, the astronomer who built the world's first completely steerable radio telescope, said, "The observation of pure chance would mean that within the 500 million to 1 billion year period, the organic molecules in the primeval seas might have to undergo 10 to the power of 130 trial assemblies in order to hit upon the correct sequence. The possibility of such a chance occurrence leading to the amount of formation of one of the smallest protein molecules is unimaginably small. Within the boundary conditions of time and space, we are considering it effectively zero." Okay, so just the chance of, I mean, we've kind of proven they've said you can, under certain conditions, get an amino acid, but those conditions we would not want to live under. Where there's no proof that they happened on Earth. Okay, but if it did, well, then that's not life. You've got to have them line up, and it's just zero, okay? Zoologist Harold Coffin summed the findings of James Coppedge. Coppedge calculates that the odds are 10 to the power of 161 zeros to 1, that not one usable protein could result from chance, even if all the atoms on the Earth's surface, including water, air, and the crust of the Earth, were made into conveniently available amino acids, and 4 to 5 billion years were involved. So if he's saying, like, it worked, and we have all these amino acids everywhere, okay, the chance of them making a protein is 10 to the power of 161. 161 for one protein over 5 billion years, not to get to humans with supercomputers and eyes that are more advanced than cameras that we have, and just technology and things we can't replicate. We're talking about one protein in 5 billion years is zero, okay? In short, chance could not produce even one protein, and a simple single-celled bacterium contains thousands of different proteins. Do you get that? Okay, we couldn't get one protein in 5 billion years. Just a bacteria has thousands of these proteins. So it just boggles the mind that we can't even get to protein or bacteria, not to mention all these different life forms and all this intelligence and all this design that we see. He said, what are the odds of assembling all the proteins necessary for life? You probably don't want to know. So we're moving up, okay? Amino acids, proteins, what about all the proteins that we need? Coffin noted, Morowitz has determined the probability for the origin of the organic precursors for the smallest likely living entity by random process. He based his calculations on reaction probabilities, a somewhat different and more accurate approach than most other such computations. The chances for producing the necessary molecules, amino acids, proteins, etc., for a cell 1/10 the size of the smallest known to man, okay, 1/10 the smallest size known to man, is less than 1 in 10 to 340 billion, or 10 with 340 million, 340 million, not billion, 340 million zeros after it. Who wants to just write that number, right? 340 million zeros. That's the chance that you get all the proteins that you need to be 1/10 of the smallest cell. Okay, just a little cell. We're not talking anything advanced. Okay, much of the misconceptions about the probabilities of life traces back to Darwin's bulldog, Thomas Huxley. In making the case, he talked about the 6 monkeys. And what did they say? If they randomly poked at typewriters long enough, they could do, the one he said was all the books in the British Museum. Have you heard that? What's the other one? All of Shakespeare's work, basically what they say. I remember in high school, I don't know if I learned it in high school, they basically say if you get monkeys typing long enough randomly on a keyboard, you can get all the works of Shakespeare. It'll just happen by chance. Okay, is that true? Okay, they obviously haven't figured out the math. What are the odds of a monkey typing one predetermined 9-letter word such as evolution? Okay, think about that. Just one word, monkeys randomly typing. Since the alphabet has 26 letters, one must multiply 26 by itself 8 times. We find the monkey would need an average more than 5 trillion attempts just to write evolution once correctly. So that was their thing, and I've heard this. Has anybody else heard that with the monkeys? Okay, that's their thing. Random chance. If you're just randomly doing it, you'll get it. You can get anything. Okay. 5 trillion attempts to get one word, 9 letters arranged in the correct order to form one word. Okay, 5 trillion attempts. Typing 10 letters per minute, this would take over 1 million years. If one word is that hard to get, one begins to fathom the difficulties of randomly producing just a paragraph of Hamlet, okay, or the components of life. Okay, it's absolutely false, that thing. I'm going to say this, finish here. Creationist scientist Duane Gish put the monkey matter in perspective. He said a monkey typing 100 letters every second, which I don't even know how a monkey could, I can't even type 100 if I was going like this, in a second. So that's just unbelievably fast. For 5 billion years would not have the remotest chance of typing a particular sentence of 100 letters even once without spelling errors. Okay, just 100 letters in a row. In fact, if 1 billion planets the size of the Earth were covered eyeball to eyeball and elbow to elbow with monkeys, Planet of the Apes, and each monkey was seated at a typewriter requiring about 10 square feet for each monkey, of the approximately 10 to the 6 square feet available, 16, on each of the billion planets, and each monkey typed a string of 100 letters every second for 5 billion years, the chances are overwhelming that not one of these monkeys would have typed the sentence correctly. Billion planet with billions of monkeys on it, all typing that fast, they wouldn't have done it. Only 10 to the 41, power of 41 tries could be made by all these monkeys in that 5 billion years. There would not be the slightest chance that a single one of the 10 to the power of 24 monkeys, that's a trillion monkeys, okay, would have typed a pre-selected sentence of 100 letters without a spelling error even once. Okay, so that just, chance. If you're given enough time, anything can happen. That's utterly, absolutely false. Okay, so they say they created an amino acid. That's not life. Okay, there's chains of 100 to form a protein and thousands to form a cell. I mean, it's just impossible. It's mathematically impossible that even a cell or a protein evolved, not to mention humans and all these different animals and variety. It's just impossible. But they're not going to tell you that. They're going to scream from the heavens that we created life in a test tube, and given the right conditions, it can happen. And it's not true, okay? And like I said, I hope this increases your faith. And once you understand it, it takes more faith to believe evolution than it is that there's a intelligent designer or creator, that we're created. We have a purpose, and God has a plan for us. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you, dear Lord. We thank you for your word and what you've done, and that the heavens declare the glory and your handiwork, and they are just evidence of a designer, a creator, dear Lord. And help us to live for you. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, you are dismissed.